Shalom Chavrim, I'm Steve Ben-Nun. You're watching Israeli News Live here on Patreon. And friends, we're going to go into a message that we shared a little bit earlier today on Israeli News Live, but a little bit more in depth about this story. And of course, the main lead article that we were looking at is how that the Israeli government is making illegal. They put a law before to be voted on to make it illegal for IDF soldiers to be filmed. Especially during the time with confrontations with Palestinians. Now, I personally think that filming this is actually for the best interest of both parties involved, both Palestinians and Israeli soldiers, because for one, it could exonerate Israeli soldiers in the event that they're being accused of misconduct. At the same time, it does protect the right of Palestinians who may not be actually involved in something, or the offense be so minor that the world needs to know what's going on. I bring this up especially in light of the fact that not only are we seeing children arrested and being detained in Israel, not Israeli citizens, mind you, but Palestinian children under military law as young as 10 years of age and even younger in some cases, as we begin to look into this story here, and in some cases for years, without proper representation, without being told they have a right to remain silent, and also being abused. Well, it doesn't only happen in Israel. We're seeing a very similar circumstance that is also happening in the United States. John Moore posted this on Twitter. A Honduran asylum seeker, too, and her mother are taken into custody near the U.S.-Mexican border. The Trump administration's zero-tolerance policy for undocumented immigrants calls for the separation of parents and children. Now, that's just troubling, and of course, this is what we're finding out at these Walmart detention centers, that it is really becoming a major mess. And in fact, right now, if you want to follow Senator Chris Van Hollen, has actually celebrated Father's Day a day early with his family. So because his children agreed, it was more important that today he traveled to the border to meet with kids who can't be with their parents because they've been ripped apart by Trump's administration's cruel new policy. Trump stopped this inhumane policy, Chris says. And of course, we're following Senator Holland just to see how this is going to play out. Because we've been getting different stories coming out about this, including from, oh gosh, I'm blank on the guy's name right now that I first saw it on, but he's one that everybody knows. It'll come to me in a minute. It will come to me in a minute. I'll go back to it in a moment, though. But anyway, also this Ahit Tamimi is known for the confronting of the Israeli soldiers, and she was arrested. She's 16 years of age. She's been arrested. She is now, as far as I understand, convicted, serving time in an Israeli prison. At 16 years of age. She is a child, for God's sake. You know, and yes, I did see the video of her smacking the Israeli soldiers, and then some just seem to justify, well, it's okay. She was smacking the Israeli soldiers. She got what she deserved. Well, really? If it was your daughter, is that exactly what you would want to have happen to her? And then what happens to her when she's in custody? What type of tortures and inhumane treatment? Is it possible that this little girl could be raped when she's probably only a virgin to begin with? And by the way, do you know anything about her family? What her family has suffered, what they have gone through? I saw a recent post about that. Her brothers have been shot multiple times. Her mother arrested 5 times. Her father arrested 9 times. I suppose if my family was harassed that much by military police, and I say this because, friends, we've got more and more Israelis. We're not talking about Palestinians. We're talking about Israelis who are coming out and saying about what's going on, how that they intentionally made life hell for Palestinians living inside of the West Bank or even in Gaza. So it's not that that this is just a one-sided event. We're seeing that it is very much true. I've shared a little bit of the documentary of 4 Israeli IDF women soldiers that have shared testimonies of what they have done, including even killing a little boy where the girl says she is in the shower trying to wash the blood off her hands and says it won't come off, just living with the nightmare of this. And what about the Israeli men like Iran Efrati, who also, I believe, is now even in hiding because of fear of his life? His father is the chief of police of Jerusalem, and yet he's speaking out about the things, the injustices that he saw inside of the West Bank. And I say this because we could have peace with the Palestinian people. I've had many Palestinian friends that have told me we didn't have these problems before the second or the first Intifada. What happened? What went wrong? What caused all this mayhem? Well, true, there are Palestinians being incited to violence. There is Hamas, who is truly a terrorist organization that is doing nothing but trying to bring more mayhem on Israeli civilians as well. But then there's the everyday Palestinian that is also suffering at the hands of Israeli soldiers that are being told pretty much they can do what they like. Call a curfew when they want to call a curfew. Little children peeing their pants, as Iran Efrati describes, because they see an Israeli soldier and scared to death that they're going to be arrested or their house will be raided in the middle of the night. These are the type things that are happening. But the question is, as we sit there and think nothing about the Palestinians, so that what will happen in America? Because we're starting to see that same type of treatment coming from the current administration against our southern neighbors, where parents are being separated from children. That is a crime against humanity, period. And it is something that is going to happen to us very soon. And I have a very sneaky suspicion. Let the time come when they go to disarm the nation in America, and watch how many American citizens will be separated from their children as well, while the state tries to run everybody over. That is something that's definitely coming next. Anyway, this girl here, this was back in December of 2017, they extended her detention of the Palestinian girl. She's still in custody. There's a military tribunal, so the poor girl has no rights whatsoever. It's kind of like American military tribunal. There is no trial of your peers. There is no justice. There is no, well, she gets an attorney or she gets to speak to her parents. None of that will exist in a case like that. And it's not only that. I pulled it up. Palestinian children being arrested. And by the way, these are real situations. Look at this right here. Look at this little boy arrested, taken into custody, probably throwing rocks. Yeah, I understand. But at the same time, is this the way you treat a child in a chokehold? Well, he's not really being a chokehold, but he's got him pretty tight around the throat, dragging him off. What about this little boy right here? His father, no doubt, trying to get him back, but they're going to drag him away from his parents. We have to examine what has happened, what has caused all the mayhem in Israel. And are we really following the true Torah laws of God? Are we really following what God has set out for us? Is this the way that God said for us to do? Did we forget the fact that God said to treat our neighbor or love our neighbor as ourself? And don't try to justify it like the man did with Jesus. He says, oh, by the way, who is my neighbor? I hope our friends do not take and go that route. Please do not do that. Another child being taken out. Two of them. This one here being blindfolded. A little bit older kid there, maybe about 14 years of age. This one here also being blindfolded and taken away. Maybe 12, 13 years of age. Caught in a sting operation. It's obvious because you can see the Israeli soldiers that were wearing the typical Arab scarves right there. Again, another young man, maybe about 16 years of age right there, being taken away prisoner. Look at this one here. Wow. Now that's pretty bad. You're going to take away a little guy that looks like he's about 6, 7 years old. You're going to drag him away. What else can we expect to see there? This one here, looks like he's already down at the detention center. He's crying his eyes out. Yeah, what about the old days where you just scare the kids? The police come, scare them, they don't want to ever do it again. No, this is not the way it happens here. By the way, they're put in prisons inside of Israel, and it's anywhere from 10 to 20 years they could be arrested. Here, another little kid's being taken away. About 14, I would say, is the age of this little boy right here. And of course, they've got a whole group of them lined up here with a soldier with a machine gun pointed down at them, which I know soldiers have machine guns. It's kind of hard to avoid that type of scenario. But the point is what is really going on? Now, this here is the Defense for the Children International, And it states here, just to give you some idea, since 1967, Palestinian children in occupied Palestinian territory have been living under Israeli military law and prosecuted in military courts. Now, I still stand for a one-state solution. I do not believe in two states. I believe that we should have democracy in the country, unlike the law that we just recently passed in Israel, or they're trying to get passed in Israel, that only allows it to be a Jewish state. That totally takes the right away from the other 10 tribes. And you may find that some of these Palestinians actually fall under the characteristics of the house of Israel, since they do have a very similar DNA to many of our Sephardic brothers and sisters. Israeli military law, which fails to ensure and denies basic and fundamental rights, is applied to the whole Palestinian population. Israeli settlers living in the West Bank are subject to the Israeli civilians and criminal legal system. Okay, around 500 to 700 Palestinian children are arrested, detained, and prosecuted in the Israeli military court system each year. The majority of Palestinian child detainees are charged with throwing stones, and 3 out of 4 experience physical violence during arrest, transfer, or interrogation. No Israeli child comes into contact with the military court system. All right, the majority of children are detained from their West Bank homes in the middle of the night. Heavily armed Israeli soldiers, several hours after their arrest, children arrive at the interrogation detention center alone, sleep deprived, and often bruised and scared. Interrogations tend to be coerced, including a variety of verbal abuse, threats, and physical violence that ultimately result in a confession. By the way, if you watch the documentary, to prove, I mean, this is of course a Palestinian website on here, but to prove, or about Palestinians I should say, supported them, to prove that the statement is true, the Israeli girl, one of those Israeli girls out of the 4 girls that were being interviewed in the documentary I shared on Israeli News Live, stated when she was concerned that maybe the child did not throw the stone that she actually pointed out as being the child that did it, she spoke to the superior officer there where they were being detained at, and she said, "I may have been wrong." And he said, "It doesn't matter. He will confess." She says, "But what if I was wrong? What if he's not the one that threw the stone?" The officer again said, "It doesn't matter. He will confess." And this girl went away. Israeli IDF soldier went away troubled in her heart, because she wasn't even sure if it was the child, and knowing they would torture this little kid to a point where he would confess whether he was guilty or not. Is that what the law of Moses called for? Is it not in the very 10 Commandments, do not bear false witness against your neighbor? And yet it is legal practice in a military of Israel to bear false witness and care less for the right of your neighbor. No wonder why judgment will still fall upon us as an Israeli people before even the coming of the 2 witnesses, before the coming of the Mashiach, because we don't care about our own neighbors. It is really a crime, very much a crime. Israeli government committee approves draft law criminalizing filming IDF soldiers. Specifically, the law is more geared to those that are filming, of course, those acts with Palestinians. Now, I do appreciate the fact the Attorney General, Avichai Mendenblit, who said it is constitutionally problematic for that to be a law. At least somebody in Israel's government is willing to stand up. The bill was sponsored by Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman, a secular right-wing Yisrael Beitenu party, was approved by the Ministerial Committee for Legislation, who determines whether a proposed legislation will be backed by the coalition government in advance for a required 3 readings in Parliament before being passed into law. The bill sets forth penalties up to 5 years in prison on anyone caught filming or publishing footage of military activities with the purpose of harming soldiers' spirit. You're going to harm the soldier's spirit because you catch him doing something wrong and you film it and it becomes public. That's supposed to help expose the evil so that you can get rid of the evil. You know what this reminds me of, what's happening in our Israeli judicial system? This reminds me of what it was in the days of the judges, when bribes and everything else were taken by the judges just to turn the other cheek. Yeah, they turn the other cheek all right when it comes to illegal activity. And no one dared say a single word about it. Just like the gay parades and everything else that's done in Israel, and we have gay pride now, and we have gay flags hanging in the Knesset. This is really what we want to support? Really? I want to support the Israeli people that are looking for the coming of the Mashiach, that are wanting to see the coming of the Messiah. I want to support the Israeli that, yes, he may be blind right now, and I'm going to be bringing out a Shabbat message. It's a little late, but I'm going to be bringing it out today on Israeli News Live, and we're going to be looking at the commandments of God and what he says, and even in the book of Romans where Paul says they're blind for your sake, but they're enemies of yours. Why? Because they're not able to keep the word of God as of yet. Jeez. Killing a child is not right, but not wrong enough for an indictment. And this guy right here, Gideon Levy, a Jewish guy, okay? And by the way, his last name being Levy, no doubt he then is from the Levite family. And the man is writing in here, very disturbed, that the Israeli prosecutor concluded that two soldiers acted properly when they shot and killed an unarmed teenager 10 meters away as he ran away from them. They'd already shot him in the leg. But then they decided, well, you know, they were able to capture him for a little bit, but he squirmed and got away and took off again. So this time they just unloaded on him, you know, put one in his neck, one in his back, and killed the guy. Not even an adult. Okay? Teenager. And now these soldiers are being exonerated. I guess it would hurt the soldier's spirit for this to go public. You know, I don't condone the rock throwing of the Palestinians of this nature either. But I do believe that if we did not aggressively hound these people in their homes at night and hear all the stories that IDF soldiers are telling about, then we would not be having the problems we have today. Okay? So, but like I said, it's coming to our house as well. Chris Van Hollen, senator, going down to Texas. He's going to look into what's really going on at those Walmarts down in Texas. Remember those stories there? Let me see if I can pull this up. Inside the former Walmart. Now, the New York Times is trying to make light of it. I guess now that it's going public and pretty much viral, they have quickly and rapidly tried to find a way to cover up what's going on. Says here, Brownsville, Texas. In the loading docks, children sat in darkened auditorium watching the animated movie Moana. Where there were once racks of clothes and aisles of appliances, there were now spotless dorm-style bedroom with neatly made beds and Pokemon posters on the wall. Boy, have they not covered that up. If it was so good at what they were doing down there, why wasn't it like this then? Why didn't they let the congressman in? Why wasn't he let in? If everything was so hunky-dory. Oh, now the senator's going down there, and you can count on one thing. They're going to have that facility looking good by the time he gets there. It still doesn't take away the fact they separate all these children from their parents. No, the children should be allowed to stay with their parents. A teeming 250,000 square foot facility is a model of a border life in Trump-era America, part of a growing industry of detention centers and shelters as federal authorities scramble to comply with the president's orders to end, catch, and release of migrants illegally entering into the country. Now that children are often being separated from their parents, this facility has had to obtain a waiver from the state to expand its facility. Costs are being added to sleeping areas. The staff is expanding, but even That is not enough. Federal authorities are considering establishing tent cities on an Army Air Force basis and have already transferred hundreds of immigrant detainees to temporary housing at federal prisons. Imagine when they get them on the Air Force bases. Yeah, you won't ever hear nothing else about what happens to those little kids, will you? Sound kind of familiar? After all, do we not know that it is the Israeli military that is over here training your FEMA and your Homeland Security personnel? After all, doesn't it also say when they sell their weapons to other countries, tried and tested in Gaza, in the West Bank, including the imprisoning of children? I can just imagine the Trump administration has been advised by my own country, Israel, what to do with these kids. Put them on a military base, do military trials, keep them safe there to where the prying public eye cannot see. The Walmart facilities are not the right place. But don't worry. They'll make it look good before they transfer all these poor little children. And remember, you're next. When they go to disarm the nation and take away your gun rights, your Second Amendment gets trashed to the ground. And it takes a military to be able to go through the United States and disarm this nation. You don't think that every family that owns a gun that doesn't give up their guns peacefully, that they're not going to take and separate you from your children? They're making ready for you now. And Israel has trained them on how to do it. So those Christian families also that believe in that right to bear arms, because you believe in a constitution, you believe in constitutional rights, you believe in your First Amendment rights, that's all going to be taken away from you in the very near future. I'm Stephen Ben-Nun. You're watching Israeli News Live. Shalom. In a world of Ein Shalom.